Amid the forested mountains of northern Sweden, the long winter nights were crowded with the restless dead. The living, isolated for months in villages, hidden amongst the trees, stayed indoors for the most part. They knew that the darkness did not belong to them. Things could happen outside the safe circle of their hearth that was best not risked or even thought of. In her cottage on a hillside, a young woman was awakened from her slumber by church bells. It was dark, as it would be, until almost noon at that time of year. But far below in the valley, she saw the doors of the village church were thrown open and light was streaming out in welcome. Although she could not be sure of the hour, it was clear that service was about to begin. In some haste, the woman dressed, wrapping herself in the warmest shawl, and taking a lantern to light her way, she set out for the church. None of her neighbors were in sight, and nothing broke the silence except for the occasional sound of ice falling from a tree and the crunching of snow beneath her feet. As she neared the church, she heard ghostly singing borne on the air. At the open church door, she sat down her lantern and composed her thoughts. Inside were rows and rows of hooded figures, and at the head of the congregation stood a priest clad all in gray. He looked up at the woman peering into the church and then went back to his prayers. She crept up the aisle between the rows of chanting worshippers, searching for a place to sit. Then help came. A gentle hand grabbed her wrist, and a soft voice spoke into her ear. "This way, dear one." Her rescuer guided her to the front of the church. The singers shuffled sideways on their bench to make room, but no one looked up or greeted her. Having seated herself in the pew, the woman turned to thank her helper, but the words died on her lips. The figure beside her had thrown back her concealing hood. The woman recognized the face at once, although it was much changed. It was the face of her sister, who she had laid to rest that autumn before the first snowfall. The sister laid a bony hand on her shoulder, and her rotted face twisted into an expression that might have been pleading. It was hard to tell, for the head was little more than bone in places. The lipless mouth stretched open to speak, but no sound came out. She pulled her arm free and began to inch her way across the bench. The figure gestured, and the woman found her voice. "You are the dead," she cried out sharply. At once, as if a spell had been broken, the singing stopped and a profound silence settled upon the congregation. Heads turned toward her and the hoods fell back. The woman felt a hand on her shoulder and jerked around. Before her was a skeleton, and behind it another. All up and down the shadowy rows swayed the figures of the dead, some still partially shrouded in flesh. Those dead the longest had faded to almost transparent shadows. The congregation began to move toward the living one among them, the bones of their feet clicking and scratching at the floor. Her sister's voice sounded again. "They have heard you. Run, for they will catch you if they can. They hunger for fresh company." The trembling woman rose to her feet. She was as quiet as could be, but each skull was turned in her direction, and bony fingers pointed. She edged off the bench and stepped into the aisle as ragged figures began to close in. She ran with the stench of death heavy at her back, with bony fingers clutching at her shawl as she crossed the threshold and leaped out into the cold night air. Behind her, a singular howl issued from the church, and then silence. Shuddering with fear, she made her way to her priest's house. She found him awake and preparing for Mass. After she told her tale, the priest, holding his crucifix before him, led her back to the church. The church was empty and peaceful. Her shawl, or what little was left of it, lay near the door, torn and clawed almost beyond recognition.
It was Christmas Eve, and the family were gathered in the living room. The father was reading the newspaper, and the mother was knitting a sweater. The children, Jimbo and Steffa, were stretched out on the floor with their crayons and their coloring books, looking bored. Steffa looked up from her coloring at her father. "Tell us a story," Steffa demanded. "Yeah, a scary one, not a story about Santa Claus," Jimbo insisted. "All right," said their father, "I'm going to tell you about the most fearsome, dangerous, and appalling creature on the earth, called the Grither." "Oh, now you've done it," said the mother. "You said his name out loud." "Who is he?" asked Jimbo. "He's the most awful thing in the world," their father said. "He lives in a cave at the North Pole, the coldest, wettest place on Earth. He sleeps in a wreck of a ship that somehow got squeezed into the mouth of a cave. He doesn't mind the cold, and he doesn't mind the wet, but the thing he hates most is to hear someone say his name aloud. He has very good ears, and they get bigger every time his name is spoken. Sometimes his ears even get so big that he can use them to fly." "I don't like this story," Steffa whined. "It's too late now," her mother said. "We've already mentioned his name. The Grither is probably already on his way to our house this very minute." "It will probably take him a while to get here," said the father. "If we finish the story before he gets here, everything will be fine." "Children, do you know why the Grither is called the Grither?" The children shook their heads. "It's because he has fists as big as basketballs and arms as long as boa constrictors. And when he finds people have been speaking his name, he opens up his fists, reaches out his arms, and he grabs them by the head. And then he squeezes and squeezes until they pop, just like a balloon." "Does he look like Bigfoot?" Jimbo asked. "No," said the father. "He's not like Bigfoot, and he's not like the abominable snowman either. Nobody knows exactly what he looks like, because the only people who have seen the Grither are the ones that the Grither has eaten. It's said that he's as tall as a tree, but he can bend over and touch the ground. His skin looks like a road map, because all of his veins show through. The blue in his veins is for fear, and the red is for rage." "Hurry up and finish the story before he gets here," Steffa cried. The Grither was born on a sailing ship that was blown off course by a storm and got lost in the Arctic Sea. They drifted around for weeks but never saw anything but glaciers and icebergs. Some of the passengers drowned, some froze to death, some starved, and the rest committed suicide. And the Grither was born out of the fear and the rage of the lost crew. "But why does he kill people?" Jimbo asked. "Nobody knows. He just doesn't like anyone telling his story or speaking his name aloud." "Is that all?" questioned Steffa. "Is that the end of the story?" "Not quite," said her father. "There's a little bit more." "Maybe you should stop," the mother interrupted. "I think we've scared them enough." The father chuckled. "You don't believe in the Grither, do you?" "No," said the children. "They lied." "Well, you shouldn't," the father said, "because we made it all up. There's no such thing as the Grither, just like there's no such thing as the Easter Bunny." "But you didn't finish the story," Steffa cried. All of a sudden, the front door blew open, and the room was enveloped in an icy blast of wind. There was a crash, and the sound of breaking glass, and then two huge, gnarled arms reached through the windows and grasped the parents by their heads. As the children watched in horror, the hands squeezed and squeezed until their parents' heads popped, just like two balloons.